I'm a head of service here at Wiltshire Council. I'm also on the programme team for the STB, and I'm just very briefly going to take you through the first 2 or 3 items on the agenda, and we'll start with some introductions. Having said that, there's a significant number of people on the call already. Let's do that very quickly, and I'll do it on the order that they turn up on my screen, if that's okay. Alice Darley.
Afternoon, everyone. Alice Darley. I'm in Regional Network Strategy at National Highways. Thanks,
Alice. Steve Pearce.
Hi, I'm Steve Pearce. I'm a Bristol councillor, but I'm here representing Dan Norris.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander.
Don Alexander, Cabinet Member for Transport in Bristol.
Thank you. Irina Sahota.
Owen Sahota from Sphere Marketing, leading on communications for Western Gateway.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Caroline Thomas, Cabinet Member responsible for highways and transport, street scene and flooding at Wiltshire Council.
Thank you. James White.
Afternoon, I'm James White. I'm one of the technical leads for the Western Gateway Subnational Transport Body.
Thank you. Councillor Wilmore.
Chris Wilmore, Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Infrastructure, which includes highways at South Gloucestershire Council.
Thank you. Councillor Slade. You're muted, Councillor Slade. No, still silent, I'm afraid. I'll come back. Let's come back. Councillor Lacey Clark.
Hi there. So I'm Councillor Knock Lacey Clark, and I'm the lead member for Highways, Parking and Travel for Dorset Council.
Thank you very much. David Glinos. Dave, your mic's off. I don't know if you're trying to talk to us.
Yeah, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, David Glinos, DFT's area lead for the Southwest, which obviously includes the Western Gateway region, and I'm the DFT sponsor for Western Gateway STB.
Thank you, David. Councillor Gray.
I am David Gray. I'm the Cabinet Member responsible for Environment and Planning at Gloucestershire County Council.
Thank you. Ewan Wilson.
Good afternoon. My name is Ewan Wilson. I am Transport Policy Team Leader for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, but I'm also one of the technical leads for the Western Gateway STB. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah Young. I'm the Cabinet Lead for Highways and Transport at North Somerset Council.
Thank you. Jack Wiltshire.
Good afternoon, Jack Wiltshire, Head of Highways for Dorset Council.
Thank you. Kelly Flynn. Mic's off, Kelly, if you're trying to talk to us. I'm back. Matt Hayward.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Hayward from Network Rail. I'm the Western route, which covers the Western Gateway area. I'm the lead strategic planner.
Thanks, Matt. Michaela Busham.
I'm Michaela Bushell, Western Gateway Communications.
Thank you. Nigel Wriggler.
Yeah, Nigel Wriggler, Executive Director for Place at South Gloucestershire Council.
Thank you. Ola Hussain.
Hi, I'm Ola Hussain, Transport Officer for Western Gateway. Thank you.
Owen Clark.
Good afternoon, I'm Owen Clark. I'm the Transport Planning, Strategy and Policy Team Manager at Dorset Council, but a technical lead on the Western Gateway's EV work.
Thank you. Pam Turton. Can't see Pam. Come back. Steve Thorne. Okay, so the 1 or 2 missed. If perhaps you could introduce yourselves when we get to you. I was keen to go back to see if we could just get Councillor Slade to introduce herself. Vicky, are you there? Still silent, I'm afraid. Yeah, okay. Yep, got that. Okay, thank you. My list kept getting longer. Is there anybody I've missed that we can't sort of resolve during the course of the meeting? Okay, let's get going. So our agenda, as I say, I'll take you through that and the next item, which is to do with governance and election of chair and vice chair, and they're sort of related, really. So we are due to appoint a chair and vice chair today for the board. Those positions will be on an interim basis, given our decision to move towards independent chair. On that, myself and colleagues have been in discussion with other STBs, particularly Midlands Connect, who are on a similar journey, but frankly have much more resource in order to be able to start to sort of consider what revisions to constitution and appointment processes might look like. So we are still trying to we're going to put together what would be the revised constitution and a process for going out to whatever sort of advert process we think is that we would recommend going for. We'll be able to do that, I think, certainly in time for the next meeting. And if we do make some progress on drafts, I'd like to think that we might be able to share that as a separate exercise rather than wait until the next board meeting comes around. So in terms of that particular aspect, more to come. In terms of election of chair and vice chair for today, do we have any nominations for chair, please? Hannah.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Don Alexander if he's prepared to continue for the interim period.
Thank you. All in favour? Anyone
Aye.
against? Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you all. So that makes my job much easier now. Don, if you're happy, can I hand the chairmanship over to you, and perhaps you could just oversee election of vice chair.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone for supporting me in this, and I'll try and do it as well as I can. But again, I was one of the people who had a very wide feeling that we should have an independent chair, so I will be more than content to stand down when that is achieved. Vice chair, could I ask for nominations, please, for the position of vice chair?
Hannah has her hand up, Don.
Oh, Hannah, okay. Hannah, sorry, I'm having trouble with this screen. I really will look forward to us being in Trowbridge next in December. Hannah.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Councillor Caroline Thomas for vice chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Pearce. Thank you. Any other nominations? I see none, so thank you very much, Caroline, for stepping up and being duly elected. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Do we have any public forum? Sorry, right, okay. No, we have no public forum. So I believe we should be on the minutes now, I think, from the previous meeting. Sorry about this. I'm juggling 3 screens. The minutes from the previous meeting.
Don, 2 secs. I think on the public engagement, we should note Dave Redgewell's absence as such a regular contributor to all these events and wish him well.
You're absolutely right. I concur with that. He's in Warwick Hospital, I think, undoubtedly watching us. And Dave, we do wish you all the best get well soon, do what you're told, and rest until we see you back, possibly in Bristol Cabinet next week. Thank you for that, Chris. The actions from the previous meeting, do we have any? Sorry, I slightly got this in the wrong order already. Actions for the previous meeting. There was a couple of things on there, weren't there, Alan?
Yeah, there were a couple on, and if colleagues have got access to the agenda, the minutes and actions sit. If you scroll down there, down below that, so there are two actions. One to do with interaction between 3 route strategies that cover the Western Gateway area, and another rather more straightforward one to put some carbon tool slides on the website. So the first one was for Richard Leonard to take away, I think, to ask his colleagues about that interaction. Is that, James, is that something that we might ask Alice to comment on later on in the meeting?
Well, I think Alice is probably ready to answer now, Alan, if that's okay.
Yep,
Don?
I can
Yes,
cover that
absolutely.
now.
Let's deal with it now. Thank you, Alice. Welcome,
Okay.
by the way.
Morning, afternoon indeed. So yes, so the question was around how the route strategies come together at a sort of regional level. As I said in the meeting, I think they are a bit of an artificial way of carving up the geography of the strategic road network across the whole country to drill into each area in a more sort of manageable way in terms of all the detail. That said, they were the 20 route strategies across the country were developed in a very consistent way. There was a one national set of data, one national sort of approach to them all. In the region, they were managed by a single delivery route lead and a single consultancy team that managed all 3 of the route strategies. And there were workshops with those people, with each of the different sort of stakeholders in each of the different geographies. And I think they were done on a sort of a route, a geographic basis rather than a particular route by route. The interactions between the routes was managed in a way that ensured that there was consistency. So where a particular geography, so there was overlap between the routes to make sure that there was a good join up, and the consistency between what was said in the different reports was ensured by the delivery team. So they joined together in that way, and then they come together as a national picture to inform the initial report and the road investment strategy and our Connecting the Country work as well. So they come together more to a national level, but we made sure that they were consistent at a regional level. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Alice. Can I suggest, if anyone's got anything they're thinking about in response to that, that we pick that up when Alice gives her report later, for the sake of moving on in the agenda in a timely manner. Thank you very much. And so we need is everyone happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? Can we approve them? Do I have a proposer and a seconder? I have Caroline as a proposer, I think.
Councillor Gray has his hand up.
David, is that for you to second it? Thank you very much to Councillor Gray for seconding it. So they are now approved, and we move on to our reports, and we're very grateful again to have David Glynos with us from DFT. We look forward to your report. We've received that as part of with the papers for this meeting, and I think I know that there are a few questions people have got to put to you at the end of your report, so we look forward. Thank you, David.
Okay, I look forward to those, Don. So just a brief update at this quarter's board. I did, as you said, circulate the paper yesterday beforehand. Apologies for the late circulation. I do it quite late, as I explained previously, to make sure it's as up to date as it possibly can be. But apologies nonetheless. So I counted through it very quickly, but you can read it at your own leisure, of course. UK to net zero by 2050. So everybody would have seen the announcements over the last few days by the Prime Minister. So the headline for that is recommitting the UK to net zero by 2050. But the main detail, no doubt, which will be pulled out by a number of people on the call today, will be the ban on the sale of petrol and diesel cars will now be pushed out to 2035 from 2030. Moving on to rail, as it applies to as it affects the southwest, you'll be aware that earlier this month, DfT awarded a national rail contract to Arriva UK Trains Limited to continue operating the cross-country rail services. That contract will commence on the 15th of October and will run for a period of at least 4 years, but up to 8 years. So there's a little bit more information in my note. As I've said previously, strategic roads. I don't want to step on the toes too much on national highways here, but just to confirm that the consultation on the third road investment strategy has now closed, and the outputs of that consultation will feed into the draft RIS, which will be published later this year, all being well. But no doubt National Highways can provide some further information on that in their update. On bus, there's been lots of announcements on bus in previous quarter. The main one this quarter is earlier this month, the Secretary of State announced the second round of zebra funding, so that's zero emission buses of up to £129 million. £25 million of that will be kept aside for rural communities in the first instance. The scheme's now open for bids from local authorities outside London in England. And applications will be prioritised on those areas which have not received funding in previous rounds. So please, if you haven't picked that up, note that the bidding, the application process is now open. Moving on to local electric vehicle infrastructure capital grants, so known as LEVI. Earlier this month, Jeremy Hunt announced that the first round of the LEVI funding is available. So basically it's open and it's notified to local authorities which tranche of funding they will be in, whether tranche one or a subsequent tranche. And also local authorities have been informed of their indicative allocations on what they're eligible to apply for. So those local authorities in the first tranche need to get their applications in by the end of November of this year. And finally, on Active Travel England wrote around to local authorities in August, outlining high-level plans for the allocation of capital and revenue funding for the current financial year, 23-24. So local authorities will be in receipt of that. So that's my quick update for this quarter. But as you said, I may have questions to attempt to answer.
Thank you, David. Questions, please. Caroline. I think your hand is up, Caroline. I think you're on mute. We've all done it.
Thank you. So the regular question with regard to DfT guidelines, with regard to local transport plans. So yes. we were promised. That's not fair. Last time we asked the question, you thought it was imminent. You thought it was within a week or so. Obviously, that's not the case. I just wonder if you can let us know what you think is happening going forward.
Yeah. So again, apologies for the delay. But what we've you've seen the recent movement in some of the announcements coming out of the very centre of government weeks and months. So it has moved on a little bit. It's moved on to say, but basically we can't provide any certainty for when it actually will now be released. But we are trying as officials and as government to try to get it out by the 2023. That is our target by the end of this calendar year. Apologies. I know we've been stringing this along for a long time now. And all I can say is officials, we've been working as hard as we possibly can to get it out there. But yeah, the target now remains by the end of this current calendar year.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you for really useful update. It'll be really helpful. I've got two questions really. One is to understand what you think DFT and possibly the Treasury, if it's not the same answer, attribute to these subnational transport bodies like Western Gateway in terms of understanding for our future planning, the reading of the runes about, are we useful? What use do you think we continue to have? We think we're useful, but it would be useful to hear what you think. That was question number one. And okay. Question number two is a question about within BSIP, how you see rural need for bus services being addressed, given the value for money emphasis within the BSIP criteria, and rural bus services tend not to produce good bums per pound spent figures.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. So first of all, probably the easier one of the two, STBs. Well, we were, since the last board meeting, we've been able to confirm STB's budgets for the current financial year. And I know we'll get onto this later, but the Western Gateway budget was not as high as it was initially anticipated. But the very fact that we were able to confirm budget, I think, is a very, very strong signal of STB's importance to ministers in a very, very difficult and constrained financial environment, especially for the Department for Transport. So as we speak, obviously, we might have a pretty big national election next year, of course. So, everything can change overnight, of course, can't it? But as we speak now, very much, we continue to support and be big fans of STBs moving forward. So I don't think we need to worry, at least in the short term, on that. In regards to BSIP, so obviously BSIP, you're part of the joint Western England Combined Authority North Somerset BSIP deal allocation, which was one of the most one of the biggest allocations in the country. So you had good news in regards to that. Obviously, how that is exactly used going forward is a devolved matter. It's up for you guys to determine how that money is allocated, albeit the DFT will oversee it to make sure that it remains good value in the round. It is a good question in regards to the value for money of sort of commercial, high density, high patronage services is always going to outstrip those which serve rural communities. But the rural community services also very much serve a purpose. But ultimately, it's a devolved issue for you guys, Councillor. I know there's been many conversations between my ministers, your mayor, and also there's been lots of correspondence in regards to between yourselves, constituent unity authorities, councillors and ministers as well on this issue. And I know it's very tricky.
Thank you. Hannah?
Thank you. Thank you, David, for being so candid about the local transport plan guidance. I think that's helpful. But obviously, you're in a position where, like us, it's not very clear what the timescale will be. But I think that still leaves us with a deadline of summer next year to be able to produce something. I appreciate you can't speak for the politicians, but what advice would you give us around what we should be looking to produce within that timescale, given that what we're seeing in the absence of guidance is potentially an avenue where we might have to go it alone and work out what we think we need to do, or should we be looking at developing something on a more limited basis?
Yeah, I think, so you would no doubt have heard from our policy leads on that. And obviously we appreciate that some local transport authorities are in the process of updating their plans currently in anticipation of the new guidance being released. And what we don't want to do, we don't want to delay that and to wait until the new guidance goes out, because I think that's going to unduly penalise authorities who are doing their best to align with the government's published commitments at this time. So I think what we can do, what we're looking to do, what we're advising local authorities is it's up to you ultimately what you decide to do and how you wish to update it and in what time scale you wish to update it in. But obviously, if you're going forward and updating it now, I'm sure that there's going to be information coming out of that will be useful for us to feed into any future comprehensive spending review, which was the initial purpose of the next summer deadline, because we'd hope to get all the local transport plans completed by that date for the information to be fed in, so the department can use it as a basis to inform our bid as part of the comprehensive spend review. We know that's not going to be possible now, but ultimately it's up to you guys. It is your choice still what you wish to do. And I'm sure that if or when the guidance is released, then it may be possible to do small updates to your plan if you need to do so as part of some sort of additional addendum to the plan. So yeah, I know it's a less than ideal situation, but we are where we are at the moment. So
helpful to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions unless, Alan, you picked up somebody that flicking through my screens. But I think that's it. David, thank you very much again for coming along and being in the hot seat. And we do really appreciate your presence with us. It makes the meeting much more valuable for all of us. Thank you very much. Over now to Matt Hayward from Network Rail. Matt, hi.
Hello, thank you. Like David, I did send around a note, but late. Yes, I apologise for that.
Thank you.
I'll make some reference to that note, and equally it will sort of sit there if anything from that prompts any further questions. But I think I'll sort of start by echoing something David said, which sort of almost goes without saying about the kind of financial constraints that the transport sector is under, but where we have historically looked at strategic rail improvements having a degree of central government funding, we need to recognise now that that is even more constrained than hitherto, and we've had the double whammy as well of where we would have been making cases 5 years ago based on an expectation of future revenue. That's of course a different expectation now in the kind of post-COVID settling down of travel and transport markets. So why am I saying this? Well, I think it's even more important than when we set out on this road 3 years ago that to give a strategic rail improvements the best chance of coming forward, we work collaboratively to build the widest, the broadest, most evidence-based case, which actually gets to some of those benefits that sit beyond, if you like, value of time, revenue that we expect a new service to generate, whilst those are critical factors. Now, this is of course relevant because we are in year 3 of a very good collaborative programme of investing in strategic rail improvement with Western Gateway, and really pleased that this year that's been a significant allocation of the budget that Western Gateway has, and with our colleagues in Wessex Route, we're taking forward 3 potential SOBC, so strategic outline business cases, for service improvements on the Heart of Wessex line, which I sort of like to think of as the Western Gateway main line in a way. That's the Bristol-Weymouth route, the north-south corridor throughout the patch. And on the between Salisbury and Yeovil as well, on the sort of an east-west route, and indeed the work that you're helping fund at Cheltenham, looking at how we can improve services in the north of the patch. Now, those all arise from the strategic study work that we led, but partook in partnership. And I think it's that model of showing alignment and consensus on what we deem to be important, and then along the way making sure that we can reflect the most granular kind of local view of benefits of how that fits in with spatial planning as well as transport planning. That's going to we're going to have to do to give ourselves the chance in the next in the near future for making the case for significant enhancements. And some of these things will require significant enhancements. So the Heart of Wessex, as many will know, is a predominantly single line railway with a fairly low frequency of service, and I think we all collectively don't think that's the right outcome. But equally, we're setting out the case for improvements there, but we know that that is a a fairly large investment. That doesn't mean to say that we're not also delivering improvements now and in the short term. So of course, in May, in one of the 2 annual timetable changes, we saw quite significant improvements in the north of the patch in particular, with additional services every hour from Bristol to Gloucester and to Westbury, and indeed to Birmingham. We see new stations, and we're seeing station improvement work scheduled as well, including at Salisbury and Dorchester South. So lots is going on, but in terms of that more strategic space, absolutely critical that we keep working well beyond the rail industry and well beyond Network Rail and our operator colleagues in making that broad case. So I'm really pleased that our joint program is still is making such good progress. In my note, you'll see some updates on things like industrial action. Hopefully, those who need to plan journeys wouldn't rely on this quarterly update for that, so I won't go into too much detail around what that looks like, but needless to say, the industrial dispute between the RMT and ASLEF unions and train operators is ongoing. So unfortunately, that will continue to have a negative impact on journeys, and in particular, some of the routes in Western Gateway, unfortunately. Equally, you'll see some updates around sort of industry planning and our business planning. But really, what we're interested in terms of, as I say, strategic rail planning is those improvements for the system that we would like to see and the role that we would like it to have in the Western Gateway. And actually, the case for that is, as has been for a few years now, that each case is judged on an individual basis on the kind of richness of the evidence and the benefits that we can show that the investment will bring to bear. So hopefully that's a useful update. There's plenty that we can take for now. Happy to take questions, but equally, I'll put my email address on the note, and always happy to discuss in more detail. I know that they can quickly get very technical talking about the railway, but always happy to do that.
Thanks very much, and for the written report as well. Questions, anyone?
Councillor Slade has a hand up.
Councillor Slade, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Apologies if I'm not asking the right question, Matt, but as we've only just had it, there's some references on here to disability improvements, and it specifically references access for all nominations, new lifts at Dorchester South and Bournemouth. Are you referring to Bournemouth, or are you referring to Boscombe? Because obviously the Boscombe project is looking like it's going to become a very expensive project, and it would be good to know whether we're talking about the same thing. Because if publicly, if there was money being spent at Bournemouth Station before there's actually progress at Boscombe Station, which is a key place in terms of the AFC Bournemouth Football Club, apart from the local community, then I think there would be some quite considerable discontent.
Thank you. So I don't know the details on Boscombe, but I know the Access for All fund that we in submissions were invited last year, in fact, and that would be for the next sort of 5 years, is yet to make decisions on allocation of funding, but I think Bournemouth was bid to that fund, and I believe therefore it's a separate thing to Boscombe, but I'm very happy to take that offline as well and involve my colleagues on Wessex route who perhaps are more closely involved than I am on that one.
Chair, I'm sorry. Chair, I'm sorry, it's Ewan Wilson here from BCP and Western Gateway. I can't find the raising hand button, so I've just interjected. Sorry.
Okay, there's no problem.
I don't think, I think that might have just been an error in answer to Councillor Slade, because BCP has our Wessex route Network Rail. We have not submitted any bids for lifts at Bournemouth, and we have a CSIF successful bid for Folkestone, which is in Bournemouth in the area of Boscombe. So I suspect the progress on the lifts issue is indeed Folkestone for Boscombe beside AFC Bournemouth. There has been a little bit of work in the background with respect to some development funding allocated towards investigating some other things at Bournemouth, but certainly not related to lifts at the moment. So I hope that provides some clarification. Might save Matt doing a bit of digging for something that's not there.
I shall anyway. Apologies if that's a sort of mistranslation, but I'll go back to at least you.
Yeah, but obviously, check, but it's just that Folkestone is within Bournemouth, so it may have just been that there's been a little detail missed. Anyway, thanks.
May just be that clarity if this is a public document, that we don't want to get the hairs running.
Thanks, Ewan, and thanks, Vicky. Any further questions?
Councillor Wilmore, done.
Chris, yes.
Yeah, a short, quick one. We've just been talking about accessibility improvements. Some of us would not settle for, but would be grateful if the current infrastructure for accessibility were more resilient, so that if Dave Redwell were here, he would be pointing out that a key interchange on the north, south, east, west routes across the country at Bristol Parkway has been utterly inaccessible to all disabled passengers for what is now getting on for a month. And that's really not on. The odd day is inevitable, but there is a significant resilience question if a main interchange is out of operation for that long.
Thank you, Councillor. So are you talking about the lifts at Bristol Parkway? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, which mean a whole set of journeys suddenly become impossible, and the rail providers are having to spend a fortune on taxis.
Thank you. Yeah, all I can say is, yeah, that isn't acceptable, and it's got the focus at the highest levels. But obviously, that's a right now problem, and I'm afraid I can't. I don't have the solution. I know that it is being worked, and I absolutely hear your point. In the strategic planning team, we are putting together an accessibility principles study so that we can have a better sort of starting point of trying to identify improvements that we want to see at not only individual stations, but also kind of categories of station across the Gateway area as well. But clearly what you've referred to there is very much a here and now problem that needs a here and now solution.
Thank you. Any further questions? I do not see any, so thank you very much, Matt, for that. And we move over now to Alice for National Highways report. Thanks, Alice. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to start with, really with the RIS3 development work, it's something that takes up a lot of our energies at the moment. Just starting that story with obviously the publications that we put out in May, which were our initial report, our route strategies and the long-term master plan connecting the country. And following that was the DFT consultation. And so thank you to the STB for putting in a response to that, and also the feedback given on connecting the country and the route strategies. We've been trawling through the responses, and particularly the STB responses, in a lot of detail to really understand not only just what we're hearing, but also what we might be able to kind of do to address some of the really good points that have been raised. So that work is ongoing, and the STB views are continuing to feed into the onward development of RIS3. We've got workshops going on right this moment with STB offices on several of the themes of connecting the country. So we've had one last week and one today, and a couple of others next week on that. So thank you to the STB offices that are participating in those discussions to help that master plan continue to evolve. We've still got quite a long way to go in the road investment strategy development. I know it feels like we've been going for a long time. We've done about probably about 2.5 years or so of this already. There is another 18 months still to go. We are going to be continuing to work with the STBs to inform that work and inform the decision making and the recommendations that go to ministers. So we'll continue this close working relationship that we've already built up with the STBs. The next milestone in this journey is the publication of the draft RIS by DFT, which will be a fairly high level document that's going to include confirmation of the funds available from Treasury there. So that's quite a key milestone, and we're anticipating that sometime later this autumn. we have been quite at pains, I think, to appreciate to sort of manage expectations and help everybody to appreciate, obviously, the financial situation, the challenges around affordability at the moment. It is very challenging, as you've seen in your own funding situation as well. DFT have seen quite a sort of flatline settlement from Treasury for transport funding, and we are not expecting something significantly big different to that, but of course, given the funding sort of affordability in the market, actually what you can buy for your money is quite seriously reduced. So it's not going to be the RIS3 that we all will be are hoping for, but we hope that we can find ways to kind of make it work, and we will continue to work with the STBs as we develop that portfolio and see that confirmed in the final RIS publication around the end of next year. So that's the RIS3 work. I will just move on to a few scheme updates just for the region. So we've had a challenging weather pattern this summer, which has meant that the poor weather and wet weather has made it quite challenging to progress with some of the builds that are going on at the moment. The A303 Sparkford to Ilchester scheme, I know it's not quite in your region, but it is A303 corridor, which I know is important to you. That site was entirely flooded in May, and that has caused quite a bit of challenge, I think, in terms of keeping on top of that programme. But a lot of the offline work of that scheme has now been completed, and work is becoming more visible to road users as we get into traffic management and start to switch traffic onto using the new carriageway, which will be happening in the next few months. We are anticipating that scheme completion around late spring next year. So we are into the sort of final phases of this now. The A417 scheme up in Gloucestershire, the preliminary works on that are approaching completion. So that's the environmental work, sort of a lot of relocation of species, and also the archaeological digs. All that has gone to plan, and we're actually slightly ahead of schedule, I believe. And the main construction of that scheme is due to start later this year. And finally, just to mention the A303 Stonehenge scheme, you'll know that Secretary of State decided in July to grant the DCO application for that scheme. That decision has received another legal challenge, as we anticipated it might. So we are waiting to hear the next steps on that from the planning inspectorate and courts. So all being well, if that progresses as we hope it will, then preliminary works for that scheme would start in the spring next year. So I think that is the main bits of my update today. Are there any questions on any of that or anything else?
Thanks, Alice. Questions, anyone?
Councillor Thomas.
Alan.
Councillor Thomas.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Your mic's off, Karen.
Caroline, you're. I'm afraid you're on mute again.
Apologies. So a slightly parochial question, if you don't mind. When the 417 is done, this is all around Birdlip. That'll obviously make a massive improvement to the traffic flowing north and south, indeed, up from the M4 to the M5. I regularly get stuck in that, so it will be fantastic. However, it also makes the north-south route, the A346 and the A338, even more attractive than it already is for vehicles coming up, particularly Amesbury type of area, huge Gretby distribution depots and so forth. So what they do is they use that direct north-south route to go and join the 417, going through all the villages and towns on that route, rather than, as they ought to, turning left or right and going up the A34 or the 350. So what's going to be done about protecting towns and villages on that immediate north-south route that drops down from the 417 at Swindon?
Okay, So that about the fear of further induced traffic from that scheme. That will
it'll encourage even more traffic to use that that route rather than going on the dual routes, which they really ought to be doing.
Okay, thank you. I will take that one away if that's okay. I mean, we obviously do a lot of modelling to understand the impacts of our schemes and manage that. But that specific point, I will take away to kind of query that specific north or south connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Councillor Matt Palmer from South Gloss.
Hello, hello. I'm actually on the strategic road network as we speak. But my question actually is, given the precarious position that we're in regarding concrete cancer, and also that a lot of the infrastructure that we actually already have sort of had a 50-year timescale on it, has Highways, I actually work for Highways, but has National Highways identified where these are going to be pinch points in the next couple of years? So that it's just so that we've got an idea of where potentially bridges might be closing, or we're going to have to do remedial works on some of these areas, so that across our area, our western area, that we have an idea of some of local aspects of the strategic road network.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that correctly, it's about a question about how do you get visibility of the programme of maintenance and renewal works across the network? Is that right?
I mean, like the forecasting of potential. Obviously, some of the bridges might have concrete cancer. I know of one, the Avonmouth Bridge, that particularly that could become a problem in the near future, and some of these other bridges, obviously the A432 being the one that's in the forefront at the moment, being in South Gloss, and not far from my ward is the Babington Road Overbridge, which is obviously
it's closed,
reached its timeline. So what I'm talking about is any of that infrastructure that was scheduled for 50 years and it's reaching the end of its life.
Yeah.
Are we aware of where the future forecasting picture is, so we can sort of prepare for it?
Yeah. So our operations team are always all over that. They've got a huge asset management team. The plans for the next 5 years, or the proposals for the next 5 years worth of investments are obviously developed in part of the road investment strategy discussions. So a lot of it is subject to the funding settlement that we get as to what works we can do, but I can certainly dig out some information about where the critical points are and what is programmed.
Yeah, because I only ask because obviously where we are in this, how far through we are with RIS 3. Potentially, we've already put forward that bid for funding for RIS 3, which is the next 5, I believe, is it 5 years? The next 5 years,
25, 30.
Yeah, so RIS 4, obviously looking onward past that, obviously that we just an idea of what might be included in RIS 4, because not everything is going to be obviously included in it because we won't get the funding for it. So just as a sense of what might be included. Thanks.
I'll see where I can dig out from the operations team on that one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. Alan, tell me if I'm wrong.
No, can't see any, John.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alice, for your report. As usual, really helpful. Appreciate your attendance with us. Thank you. James is now going to present an item, which is our revised programme in the light of our new budget. James, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is paper A in the agenda papers, and this is presenting a revised programme following the Department for Transport's funding settlement for the STB. David Glynos has already mentioned the funding for this year. We approved a business plan earlier on this year based on an uplift in our funding for 23-24 and for 24-25. Unfortunately, our funding has been frozen at 2022-23 levels. So whilst we were expecting an uplift of around £211,000, we're not now going to receive that. So this means that we do have to revise the work programme, which was based around receiving that uplift. In paper A, table 1 puts forward a proposed revised programme. In the table, you'll see there's a column which is for the previous budget and then the proposals for the revised budget. And where there is a major change, this is highlighted in orange. The proposal is to try and maintain funding for some of our key work areas, particularly producing the strategic transport plan, the rail work, which Matt's been referring to, our work on freight, electric vehicle charging strategy, and also the coach strategy, which was approved back in June at the last board meeting, as well as continue funding for rural mobility. Where reductions are proposed is around some of the areas of work where things haven't advanced as far as perhaps we would have hoped during the course of the year. Alternative fuels being an example of this, where we are awaiting the final version of the shortlisting tool for alternative fuel sites for hydrogen and electric vehicle charging for freight vehicles. So reduced budget on that one, and then several work streams around the regional centre of excellence and providing business case support are less developed. So it's proposed pushing those, or deferring those rather, into 2025. Other elements have been scaled down. The contingency budget has been reduced to reflect the fact that the overall budget is less. Likewise, the ongoing budget for updates has also been reduced. And then in terms of staffing, we were unsuccessful in trying to recruit a new lead officer earlier on this year. So for the moment, there is a substantial saving in staffing costs with not having a lead officer in post. And we will be exploring ways to take forward that lead officer post in other ways. One thing, two other things to flag up here. The rural budget, yes, still has very strong commitment to the rural mobility work. It is possible that the budget for rural mobility may be coming in under budget for this year, so that may free up some resources to redirect to some of those areas where we've either scaled down the budget for this year or proposing deferring it into 24-25. So there is potentially some elements of flexibility going forward, and just also to flag up that we are expecting new business plan guidance for STBs. That's expected fairly soon, and that may need the board to look again at the programme for 24-25. So I think whilst it's obviously a bit disappointing that our funding has not reached the levels that we were expecting it to, we're still trying to very much commit ourselves to those key work areas which have been previously identified, and keep that momentum going on the programme as a whole. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
James, thanks. That's helpful. Just looking for
Councillor Young, Don.
Councillor Young, Hannah.
It's a comment rather than a question, but you've expressed disappointment, and I just think it's really important to note that I think everyone recognises the pressures we're all facing in terms of financial choices, but when we're hearing government commitments about longer term priorities and focusing on the need to get those right, to cut funding towards the sort of work that sets in a partnership way some clear priorities for some very substantial longer term work, I think is short-sighted. And I'd just like to note that we have to obviously live within our means, so I recognise the difficult choices that have been made here, and it's good to see that in the main work streams are continuing, albeit one or two slightly delayed. The thing I would say is that I just think it's really important that we continue to press with our plans for longer term, more stable leadership of this partnership. I think someone on the call, Councillor Wilmore's already said, we consider ourselves to be valuable. I think there's a lot that we can do going forward, and it will be really good to get arrangements in place for the support for that properly, and the full-time, sorry, not full-time, but the permanent chair role, not undermining the fantastic job that Don is doing in the meantime. But I just wanted to make those comments. So thanks for the paper, but I think we should note those things.
Thanks, Hannah. I agree with you. It's challenged our ability to provide the strong, clear leadership which was a steer from Baroness Spear to our previous chair, Councillor Green, only not even 12 months ago. So that I share your disappointment. David, I think is next.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say everything that Hannah has just said, so just reiterate. But I think it's very important that we don't allow our somewhat more straitened circumstances to crimp the energy and ambition that we bring to the things that we do focus on. So I think they've done a good job has been done in terms of cutting our cloth to meet our budget, and we just need to be fully committed around that and recognise that the subnational transport boards do have a very important part to play, and we need to be fully committed behind those things that we carry forward. And whilst it's regrettable that we may defer things or have to drop certain things, we need to make sure that we don't lose the commitment around the things that we're still going to get done, because they will deliver a lot for the region. So, as I say, basically echoing what Hannah said.
Yeah, thank you. Agreed, David. Chris?
Really a question about the Centre of Excellence. It says review planned activities. I'm really interested, not necessarily in this meeting, but outside this meeting, in seeing a plan for how, given the funding available, we're going to produce the networking and the sharing of good practice that the Centre of Excellence really seeks to drive. There have been lots and lots of useful bilaterals, I know, but I'm just cautious about the consequence of that change for our ability to stop reinventing the wheel multiple times. And so,
James, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, Centre of Excellence is one of the requirements from the Department for Transport for STBs to undertake. In many respects, I think everything we do is really there as a centre of excellence, because it's all the work we do is to support the local authorities. But this is, I suppose, more formalising that approach. It is something where I think we draw on what some of the other STBs are doing, to avoid unnecessary duplication, and if we can beg or borrow or steal from the other STBs, and likewise we share with them, then all the better. We have draft proposals for developing the Centre of Excellence, which the budget was going to be relatively modest anyway at 50,000, but as I mentioned, there was potential to redirect funds from the Rural Mobility budget if need be to get the Centre of Excellence work going again. But I just would like to stress that things like, and we're coming on to this a bit later, things like the carbon forecasting tool, which is a tool there for all the local authorities to use, that is part and parcel of our Centre of Excellence approach. What the budget was for was developing further ideas to help local authorities, be with their local transport plans, or developing the business cases for their large schemes. So it's still very much there as an ambition to keep developing the role as regional centre of excellence. It's just paused. Some of the other ideas paused for now, at least, given the funding situation.
Thank you, that's really helpful. But if I can come up with supplementary, I think what I'm saying is there are some things in life where the phrase put up or shut up applies. And in this context, it would either we don't have one, or we need real clarity about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And actually, it's really important because it's a cost saver if it's done well, because it stops people from having to reinvent wheels, sometimes badly. And so I would like to, rather than just saying, oh, well, we'll sort of shuffle it to one side, to really understand what we can do and how to do it, what sort of network, mailing list or whatever it may be, that we are going to be using, given we've not got very much money, and given the importance of it to the sub-regional, the objectives of the sub-regional grouping.
Chair, if I might make a suggestion, if I come back to the next board meeting with a report setting out what we are planning to do on the Centre of Excellence and go into a bit more detail,
Thanks, James.
which I hope will
gonna
reassure you that
suggest-
we're very much committed to this. Yeah.
Excellent. I think that that's the right way forward. Thank you very much, everyone. I can't see any more hands, and actually I do need to move us on, I think. Thanks, James, for that, because we've got some reports coming out a little bit behind the time. So the work programme reports, carbon tool. Ola, please.
Hi, I'm just gonna share my screen.
Thank you.
So at the Western Gateway, we've been busy working on different ways to quantify carbon reduction. So we currently have in place the carbon baseline and forecasting tool, which is meant to inform our strategic transport plan as well as support local transport plans being developed by the constituent authorities. This essentially is a bottom-up approach that slices and dices carbon emissions. So the disaggregation is by a trip type, by journey length, and by mode. It currently has a 2019 baseline year and is able to forecast up to 2050. There's currently two versions of the tool. There's a business as usual, and then there was one that was previously named the central case, but has been renamed to accelerated EV take-up after feedback from the local authorities. It is a spreadsheet type model. It has 45 incorporated levers that test out the different interventions and the impact they have on carbon emissions. They have three key themes, where the first one is substituting trips and looks at interventions for active travel infrastructure, land use planning, and IT infrastructure. Then there's the modal shift theme, which considers shared mobility interventions as well as modern public transport, street design and access restrictions, as well as fiscal measures. The third theme is the fuel switch, which looks at EV charging infrastructure and fleet conversions. This is just like some snapshots of the tool. The first section here looks at the output. So the user is able to select which area they're looking at. So you can see the Western Gateway area as a whole, or you can select a specific authority within the Western Gateway region. If you can see, the green bars sort of tell you where you stand in comparison to other authorities. So it's a good sort of comparative exercise to see how much you're contributing to the overall Western Gateway carbon emissions. And it also looks at it by population. Here is where you can see some of the results broken down through the slice and dice approach. So each graph would explain the source of emissions, whether the road type the emissions are coming from, or the mode of transport for the specific location. This sort of goes into more detail and provides a higher level analysis, a deeper analysis of the emissions. This section is sort of the brain of the, the brain of the tool, and sort of explains the assumptions behind the results. So it also gives some future proof into the tool as things change. The user could make informed changes to the assumptions to reflect their authorities. So back in May, we sort of had a workshop as a soft launch for the carbon tool, where we engaged with all local authorities. We had very good attendance and received very helpful feedback. Some of the areas we received feedback on were related to functionality of the tool, and there were concerns that some of the results may be overly optimistic. We went back to check the assumptions and verify that there isn't an element of optimism, and that inputs are aligned. And we also so we also inserted warnings and sort of guidance on how to use the various interventions, just to support the users and to make sure that data isn't misinterpreted. We have recently also set up a SharePoint page as part of the Center of Excellence work. So it's a site that essentially we've granted access to the transport officer group so they can see what the different tools we have going on that will support their quantification of carbon reduction. And it's just quick explanations of what the tool does and then links to the actual tool on a secure platform. And then this has been going very well. We've received quite good interest from multiple authorities to use the tool, which has been promising. So that was it for the carbon tool. In the pipeline, another work stream for decarbonization. We've been approached by the wider STB sort of cohort to integrate our current carbon baseline into a nationwide online tool, which is something the other STBs like the England's Economic Heartland, Transport for the Southeast and Transport East have been working on. This is a big project that they've been working on for quite a few years, I think. And it's essentially a more sophisticated and user-friendly tool that offers an added level of analysis that our existing tool does not have. For example, it disaggregates by place type. So it offers 9 different place types, and which essentially show which sort of interventions work best in which sort of areas. So that's very helpful in terms of devising or testing out interventions and their impact on carbon. And then the user has the ability to set scale and intensity of the different interventions. So the added level of sophistication in this tool is that it also offers intervention cards, which explain what each intervention is, how to use it, what it can be coupled with, and the sort of investment required for this intervention. And then it has a policy builder where you can add interventions and set the scale and intensity for each intervention to come up with policies to tackle carbon emissions in your area. So right now, what we're doing at the Western Gateway is refining the scope and requirements of how we're going to integrate our baseline into this nationwide tool. There's obviously a lot of merit in working with the other STBs in using a single tool to quantify carbon reduction. And it's just one of the many areas where STBs come together and pool resources to to support the constituent authorities. I'm happy to take any questions.
Ola, thank you very much. I think that is excellent. And, you know, as local authorities are trying to build up a picture of the carbon emissions in their area, transport is a big part of that. And I think this was very valuable. I'm not surprised a lot of officers were in attendance to find out more. Do people have questions, please? I can't see anything. I'm glad to hear. Oh, sorry, Caroline. Glad to hear. Just before I forget, because I have terrible memory, very glad to hear that this will be going up on our website, these slides afterwards. So members of the public will be able to take a more in-depth look later at their leisure. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. Can I just clarify that the tool will be available for use by individual local authorities? Yeah. And would it also mean that parish councils, town councils might be able to use it? What's the level of training that might be involved? What level of granularity does it actually go down to in support of that?
As it is, it currently breaks it down by local authority. The current carbon tool, yeah, maybe James can.
So you wouldn't be able to, so, you know, I'm not talking about, when I said parish councils, what I was really thinking about is conurbation. So in Wiltshire, Salisbury, for example, or Trowbridge. So it wouldn't go down to a large city town level.
Can you put a boundary in?
With the existing tool, it's not possible, but with the decarbonization policy playbook, it sort of has MSOA level boundaries that can be used, and also that's where the place type element is really useful. So that in that sense, the playbook will probably be more beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. It's quite a technical but very valuable question. Feel free to take it up with Ola later. A useful question. Chris.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Ola, for the presentation. I was sitting there as you were presenting, itching to get into the data sets. But my question is about the report itself, paper B, and the next steps. And I want to be clear what it is we are being recommended to do, because it says recommended we adopt option B, which I assume is actually option 2, which is the more bottom-up approach. And it says with support outlined by the next steps below, and there aren't any next steps below. So I'm assuming it's para 5.1 to 5.4 that you're talking about as the next steps.
I think, Chair,
report, if you see what I mean.
Is this the EV electric vehicle strategy referring to, Councillor Wilmore?
Yeah.
Because we'll come back to the electric vehicle strategy in a moment. Sorry to interrupt, Chair.
No,
my fault.
That's correct. But unless Ola wants to offer us a couple of options, I think we're. No, you don't. That's great. This is for noting. So yeah, it's an excellent paper. Anything else, Chris, on this?
Not if you're taking paper B separately, no.
Yeah, we'll take paper B separately if that's all right with everyone.
But Chair, we do have Kelly Flynn and Owen from Dorset to deal with pick up on paper B and the electric vehicle charging strategy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Any further questions on this? I'm sorry to move us on so quickly, but I've let the time get out of hand a little bit. Ola, thank you. It's an excellent bit of work. It's aroused a lot of interest. And like Chris, I want to get into the data sets, and I'm not going to let anyone in this meeting start to get into those data sets because there's no end to it. Is that it's fascinating, but also really, really, really important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Cycling strategy, Hannah. Fountain, not Hannah Young. Hannah Young looked shocked at that point.
Thanks very much. I will keep this brief, not least because COVID is making talking a challenge at the moment. But it's just to provide a very brief update on where we are with the development of the of the cycling strategy. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, as having a presentation may preclude me from having to speak quite so much. So hopefully you can see that the background to the cycling strategy was that it was developed last year, 2022. 179 cycling routes were proposed by partner authorities and scored against a framework of assessment criteria that had been agreed by a working group of officers from all the relevant authorities. Excuse me. And it resulted in this map, which I'm a bit scared to put up in case it reopens any old wounds. But essentially, it was not accepted by the board because the route outputs were considered to be much too clustered around the urban areas and not to reflect the diversity of the region and the outputs that were sought from the strategy. So it went back to the drawing board. A couple of sort of routes forward identified. One was what was called a thematic shift of the sift, of the proposals to sort of bring forward different priorities and different potential areas of focus within the routes proposed, which might, lead to a different spread of route scoring options. The second one was to review the existing metrics and the scoring process that might lead to a broader sort of regional distribution of high scoring routes. So we've been working on those elements over the summer. And a part way through, so I've just kind of outlined here what is effectively a sort of framework decision tree for what can be done with this strategy. So the top level is the thematic sift, and yes, no refers to whether it delivers the type of results or outputs we feel we wanted from the strategy. If that one had, we could have moved straight to finalising the strategy. It hasn't in and of itself, so we've done a high-level review of the metrics involved, and again reviewing whether that has adapted the output sufficiently to meet the original aims and intentions of the strategy. Unfortunately, that has not, in and of itself or in combination with a thematic shift, yet yielded that kind of result. So we're now, so we've completed that level encircled by the red dots. So we're now kind of moving down to a more sort of detailed, fundamental review of some of the metrics. And if you like, we've kind of done the low-hanging fruit of changing the metrics, and it hasn't quite taken us in the direction we'd hoped for. So we're now moving on to a more detailed review of those metrics and some of the other decisions that were taken earlier on in the strategy to kind of consider whether those have had unintended consequences on the outputs. So that's where we are effectively. We're at the third stage of the three-stage review. If that one does not yield a sort of a decision or an output that we are able to accept, then I think there'd be a sort of a more fundamental decision to be taken at that stage as to whether we just accept that the findings are genuinely reflective of the balance of priorities for cycling in the region and finalise it on that basis, or whether we need to undertake a more sort of fundamental review of how the cycling strategy was conducted and its relevance in the region. So that's it really. It's just for information, just where we are in terms of development so far. So I'll stop sharing.
Hannah, thank you very much. And thank you for making the effort well, it's obviously a very poor state of health at the moment. So I think not too many questions, and also given Chris, your hand's up. Have you got a question? No, you're okay. Great. Yeah, I mean, there is obviously slightly worrying that we've had to take that step backwards. Yeah, I guess it would be good to hear back from you again, perhaps at the next meeting, if it was possible, just to review what we've said in the past, the timeline of these things. We do need to kind of keep reevaluating our contribution, I think, as politicians, and not just obviously keep redoing work. We need to take a look at it as it's going along and make sure that we're being as supportive and giving strategic leadership as we should be. And obviously you've got concerns and we need to take that on board, I think. Are there any urgent questions for Hannah? Otherwise, it's Lemsip and Bed, I think. No? Thanks, because the time is going. But thank you, Hannah, and all the best. Now on to rail. James, Cheltenham Spa. How short can you make this, James?
This
your
will be
fault. It's the chair's fault.
No, this will be very short,
Okay,
Chair.
thank you.
Because
I'm so relieved.
Yeah, Matt Hayward in his Network Rail update has already mentioned what work's being undertaken for Cheltenham Spa, and this is just as a very quick reminder. It's the additional south-facing bay platform at Cheltenham Spa. This came out of the Bristol to Birmingham strategic corridor study, which identified it as a scheme to develop further. And the Western Gateway has been funding some background work on performance modelling and capacity analysis. Generally, the bay works very well, but there is a wider impact on performance when all the additional services that we would want to see come forward are then added to the network. So there's some more work going to be undertaken looking at that wider case that Matt was talking about in his update, and bringing in the potential benefits for the bay platform for race week traffic, as well as the benefits for Transport for Wales and their aspirations for more services between South Wales and Gloucester, and also exploring the potential for more active travel links to and from Cheltenham Spa station. So there's a bit more work to do on the Cheltenham Spa bay platform at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to come back to the board in December with a more detailed report, and also hopefully we will be at the stage where it's a decision time on then what to do next, whether to continue to develop the business case for the platform. But it is very much a scheme that is a good idea and a necessary intervention going forward with all the enhanced services that we hope to see on the Bristol to Birmingham and South Wales to Birmingham corridor.
Thanks, James. Can we move on to Owen and the EV strategy? It's quite a localised thing, Cheltenham. It's important, but time is. Owen, thank you very much. Paper B.
I'm actually going to pass you on to my colleague Kelly, who works in my team and who's been very ably leading this work for the Western Gateway. So, Kelly, if you can get the slides up, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kelly.
Kelly, are you able to take control of the presentation? No, I can't actually see Kelly on the call anymore, but I will.
I have the same problem. Thanks.
So
Owen, can you take this forward? Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So we've been working with WSP to undertake a demand assessment study. So this is really just to give you a quick update a flavour of some of the key findings, and then outline some of the next steps. So we commissioned WSP jointly through the Peninsula to undertake the EV charging study for the Southwest region. And WSP have used their in-house EV Ready tool, which is a very similar assessment that they've completed for Transport for the North, Transport East, and England's economic heartland. So by using WSP again for our work, we've ensured that we've got a consistent approach, and we'll have comparable outputs to those other STB areas. And the purpose of the work was to inform the development of a regional EV strategy by providing data on how many charge points are needed to meet future demand, and provide an indication of where these should be located and what types of chargers should be installed. And this is important information that will support local authorities with their Levi bids, EV strategies, and their delivery programs. So the EV Ready tool uses lots of different data sources, including DFT data, to calculate expected electric vehicle numbers, and to give forecasts for high and low scenarios up to 2050. These forecasts are then used to sort of calculate the numbers of charge points that are needed, where those charge points will be needed, and what types will be needed. And then that analysis can be used to identify the gaps where the public sector will need to intervene to fill the gaps and ensure that we have an accessible network across the region. The work's largely progressed as planned, and we're very happy with the quality of WSP's work on this commission. There's only been some very minor delays that have been experienced. The report's now been finalised, and we're hoping that will be circulated along with the GIS data to the local authorities imminently.
Oh, and can you see and hear me now? Because I'm happy to take over.
We can.
Yep.
Thanks, Kelly.
Hooray!
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I had to leave the meeting.
You just tell me when you want the slides progressing.
Okie dokie, no problem at all. Just bear with me 1 second whilst I get to the right slide. Okay, so sorry, Erin, could you just tell me which number slide we're on? Have we just done progress?
Yeah, we're on to summary of key findings.
Right, so, brilliant, thank you. So the forecast uptake of EVs enables an assessment of associated charging requirements. This takes into account variables such as charging habits, vehicle mileage and efficiency, access to off-road parking, and proportion of charging delivered via public chargers, trends in vehicle and charger technology, and average charge rates. Apologies if I'm talking too quickly. There will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. So the data in the report shows that across the Southwest region, including Peninsula, by 2030, up to 43,400 charge points could be required, almost 20 times more than what we currently have. Whilst the private sector will provide a proportion of the infrastructure required in the region, the public sector will need to intervene to fill the gaps in the public charger network. To plug the gap left by the private sector, it's forecasted that the public sector will need to deliver around 14,800 and 21,400 standard charge points and 850 to 1,180 rapid charge points. Installing this volume of charge points is going to be extremely challenging for local authorities, and the expectation of the Department for Transport is that councils will leverage private sector investment and skills in order to install charge points at the scale and pace required. The impact of tourism analysis shows that across the Southwest regions, there's estimated to be an increase in vehicle miles of 24% in the peak month of August relative to the average month of March. The Peninsula STB experiences greater seasonality than the Western Gateway, and the uplift also varies between local authorities. It's predicted the private sector will supply the majority of this infrastructure, though, but key areas where the local authority provision will be required will be in council car parks, which serve tourist destinations. We're going to carry out further analysis to identify these locations. At the moment, it's too soon to reflect upon last week's government announcement to recast these numbers, but there's likely to be some impact. Our thoughts at this stage are that the lower scenario figures presented in the report are now what we should be aiming for rather than the higher scenario. Next slide, Owen. Owen, are you able to click to the next slide? Ah, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see the screen. So this is just a couple of maps to show the sort of outputs that the local authorities will benefit from. The data is available down to a small, what's called a hex level of geography. So this can even go down to street level, allowing for very localized analysis. The study data will also be provided in a GIS format to be shared with local authorities, allowing individual authorities to use this data alongside their own data sets. Next slide, Owen. So now we move on to next steps. The next step is to distribute the study and data in GIS format to the local authorities as soon as it's available to do so. Going forward, we're going to need to form a clear view on the future role of the STB with regards to EVCP provision. So we need to work out, does the STB want to take a lead, such as Transport for the North and Midlands Connect, who have a dedicated team responsible for securing funding, procurement activities, liaising with distribution network operators and National Grid, etc., which will require significant additional resource? Or does it adopt a more bottom-up approach and provide local authorities with support through a forum and the Centre of Excellence? Obviously, that's for the board to decide, but it's our recommendation that due to the limited resources available to the STB for this work stream, that we should go with the second option of the bottom-up approach. Following that decision, we propose to undertake a survey of local authorities across the region to ascertain their progress ambitions and what support they would need from the STB. We'd also need to set up an officer working group to engage, or propose to set up an officer working group to engage officers preparing levi bids. Appreciate it might be a little bit late for that now, but you know, there might still be some help we can give them, and future EV strategies to ensure a regional approach to the delivery of electric vehicle charge points. We also propose to create a Southwest Regional Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Forum to engage more widely with other stakeholders such as DNOs, the district network operators, large employers and landowners such as the NHS and National Trust, amongst others, with a view to discuss and address common strategic issues, including future grid capacity requirements. In conjunction with this work, we'll develop a regional strategy, potentially with the Peninsula STB, so as to cover the entire Southwest region. And we will be inviting WSP to speak at the December meeting, and they will be able to go into more detail about the study and answer any questions you have about it. So that wraps up our presentation, and now it's any questions.
Kelly, thank you very much, and Owen as well. Could you take the slides down, please? Thank you very much. That's excellent. Yeah, onto the decision. Is it 1 and 2? Is it a realist? Is it really a decision? Because, in all honesty, James and Alan, is 1 even an option for us, given the discussion we've already had around funding?
Chair, if I may, yeah, I mean, we present the option, but I think the pragmatic and realistic one is the second of the two options, as is recommended in the report.
Thank you. Over to you, Chris, because you wanted to comment on this.
The report says recommends adopting a more bottom-up approach and providing local authorities with support outlined by the next steps below. But there aren't any next steps below, so I came to this meeting a little unclear about what the second option actually meant us doing collectively, because there do seem to me to be some things that we do actually need at least a little bit of collective conversation about, if not actually doing collectively. One is ensuring appropriate provision on the regional corridors, which may not come as consistently as we might hope through each transport authority doing its own thing. There is some grid DNO work that, particularly with the tourism element, we need perhaps to do more collectively. I think there is something to be done with the key, not individual honeypots, something like Bristol Zoo. You know, that's a WECA. issue for us to talk to them. But where we've got regional multi-site tourist providers like the National Trust, it seems to me it's going to be better for them as well as for us if we have collective conversations around provision, even if you then say, and then the site specifics, of course, are going to be local. I wasn't convinced by the NHS being one that would work well at this particular regional level, because it cuts its cookie in a different way, and ditto with large employers. But there seems to me to be a small number of things which doing together might be better for the other people we're trying to bring into this narrative. And I have one question. So that was a question about what we mean by next steps for the bottom-up approach. And then my other question was, I just wanted reassurance that in your demand mapping, you have mapped into that the EV exclusion factors around locations that can't do home charging.
Yes, that has been addressed, and WSP will be able to give you further detail on that in their presentation at the next meeting. I'm sorry you didn't get the next steps, but I did broadly cover it in the last slide.
Could I just deal with Chris's first point, Kelly?
Oh, sorry.
No, excuse me, interrupting.
Slides in the paper, and so the paper wasn't clear exactly what we were going to do. Could we have the last slide back up, because it got taken down very quickly, and so I want to be clear what it is we are actually being asked to agree, and what we're doing collectively, and what we're being sent home to do on our own. Is that possible?
Owen, are you able to share that, please?
Or stick it in the notes in the chat.
I think just to take Chris's first point or 2 points, I think this would be quite usefully discussed as a case study within the Centre of Excellence paper, because I think it's for politicians, what we're perhaps struggling to understand is quite how the Centre of Excellence will feed into our individual authorities, be they combined or unitary, and what that kind of looks like in a more detailed scenario, and that probably needs a case study. James, Alan, do you sort of agree with that? Is that what kind of Chris is feeling for? And I'm also kind of resonating with that.
I think yes. I think that it would work well as an example to bring back as part of that Centre of Excellence report for the next board, because this work is very much about helping the local authorities with their EV charging strategy. So yeah, I suppose it would be a good example.
I think that's the area where we as politicians struggle a bit to know what that actually looks like and what the contribution we're making it is. And it does need a tangible, concrete example, I think, to help us to grasp that. Chris, was that what you wanted to see?
That's what I wanted to see, and somebody's put in the chat, but it doesn't answer my question, because the list of things there is a list of hows, and actually, the things we're going to do. I don't see how you can work out what it is you want to do until you've decided what it is we are doing collectively. What are the outcomes that we collectively need help on? And then we can work out the mechanism for providing that collective outcome. And if you say, well, we actually want another 3 months to work out what it is we want collective outcomes on, and then we'll come back to you and tell you how we're going to deliver those collective outcomes, absolutely fine by me. But I'm cautious about agreeing processes and structures and groupings before we've decided what it is we actually need to be doing collectively.
I think at the moment these are considered to be officer working groups to just ascertain what those collective outcomes are. I think at the moment local authorities are all doing their own thing, ourselves included, and it's just a way of bringing them in together. And the reason for developing a forum was allowing us to have a Western Gateway group, as it were, and then a wider forum which could include Peninsula, particularly if we're looking towards developing a further or a wider regional strategy with regards to provision of electric vehicle charge points. Sorry, you have your head in your hands.
No, I think that's what I've seen something new there, which is that we are convening officer working groups, and for me that's a new insight and into our way of working, and that's important that we understand. Chris, can we move this as and discuss it in depth as part of under the banner of Centre of Excellence next time, or is there something you need clarification on now?
Yes, I think my ratio of action to having committees to talk about possibly considering action is reaching its limit on this one. But yes, that's fine, Don, as a way forward.
In a sense, if we're going for that second of those two options, which is bottom up, that sort of does suggest a bit of committee working, doesn't it, in a sense, because we're not going to, I think we're agreed, we're not going to draw up a strategy and try and leverage private sector funding in order to install charge points across the region. But if anyone disagrees with that, then by all means you're welcome to disagree. But of course you can, Caroline. Sorry, we've quite.
Sorry, I'm sort of frankly a little bit confused. So I think I'm understanding an element of what Councillor Wilmore is suggesting, but I'm not quite sure. So I would have thought the purpose of doing this, part of the purpose of doing this study through the STB, is that we're doing it once. So we're all benefiting from a piece of work. But out of that, I would have thought an obvious benefit would be linking to our transport strategy, which we're going to talk on in a moment, is actually to make sure that a fair cohort of our EV charging infrastructure is orientated around routes, not just we could do with another one in Marlborough. Thank you very much. And I don't see how we can do the route orientated support for EV infrastructure by taking a bottom-up approach. So I'm a bit confused about what are we attempting to do here in terms of ensuring Western Gateway, possibly with Peninsula, actually has a coherent EV charging strategy that facilitates the wider transport network and therefore drives economic benefit, as opposed to this being a really helpful tool for local authorities to go away and work out, how many they need how many in Wiltshire we need in Trowbridge and how many we might need in Chippenham, whatever it may be. So I'm a bit confused about that. What is the purpose and what's the direction? And then I've also got specific queries. So what's meant by leverage private sector investment and skills? How do we do that then?
What's the
broad idea behind that, for example?
Given the timing of the meeting, could I ask James to answer that in 1 minute, please? And then we were going to have to take this on to the next meeting, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Chair, I think perhaps it would be given the time constraints, if Kelly and Owen and myself, if we produce a response on all of those questions and just set out where we think this work needs to go. I think otherwise I might take far too long trying to talk through all the issues. But it is just, I will just pick up one point about that route orientation thing. I think that's where the STB does have that benefit and bringing everyone together, because we can see routes in their entirety rather than just each authority doing their own little bit in perhaps slightly different ways. So I think that is one of the big benefits of this work. Yes, it is a bottom-up approach and we feed everything in, but we can also take that strategic overview at the same time. But we'll come back to everyone in more detail on that.
I think this is all part of the same question, really, which gets at the heart of what the purpose of the STB is going on. So I think it's in one way we have to curtail it here for today, but I do think we need to take it up in some depth under that next paper, because if there is misunderstanding and disagreement over what we're actually doing, then we're obviously not going to be able to present a good case for funding, etc., etc. So very, very valid discussion. but it will be, the rest of it will be in December. Thank you, everyone. James, strategic plan update and financial update, forward decision plan. You have, I'm afraid, 12 minutes because we have an item of AOB, and I accept full responsibility for the situation.
Right. I shall try and be as brief as I can, Chair. Paper C is the strategic transport plan update. We had hoped to be able to bring to this board a consultation draft of the long-term strategic transport plan to get approval from the board and then go out to consultation in October and November. Unfortunately, that hasn't proved to be possible, and in paper C we propose a revised timescale for undertaking that work, but we felt it was important to at least give a good indication of where the work on the strategic transport plan is going, and to this end, as Appendix 1 in the report, there is a direction statement which tries to capture where the work's been going up till now and where it's going to be going to next. It sets out some very draft vision and objectives, capture some of the evidence base that we've been working on, how the earlier engagement that took place in the year on making the right choice, how that's starting to shape the plan, and setting out ideas for 6 central key policies around modal shift, decarbonisation, freight, rural mobility, connectivity, and supporting housing and employment growth. It is very much a document that is just an indication of direction that we're going in. Nothing is set in stone, but all comments and ideas and suggestions are very welcome. One of the sections in that direction statement flags up some possible strategic investment priorities. These are, I would suggest, are indicative at this stage, but to give an idea of the sort of regional interventions that are going to be in the strategic transport plan, where these interventions are having a potentially a region-wide impact, but also an impact on groupings of local authorities as well. So it's just an indication of where we're going, and feedback is very welcome. In terms of the programme, the intention now is to bring back the draft version of the strategic transport plan to the board in December to approve to go out to public consultation. That consultation could start in December, but with Christmas in the way, it's probably more sensible that it starts in early January and runs into February, and then come back to the board with the final version of the plan following consultation for approval. In terms of that consultation, Appendix 2 in the report sets out a communications strategy, which is very similar to the strategy we've used for the Making the Right Choices consultation, which took place, as mentioned earlier on this year. The focus will be on key stakeholders, but it will be open to the wider public and other groups, and all responses will be welcomed. We'll be using social media and our local authority communications teams. But again, we were looking at other ideas for taking this forward. But I think the one thing to stress here, that given our level of resources, we won't be holding public meetings. Online events, hopefully, but not public meetings face to face. Apologies, Chair, that was quite a run through what is actually very important document we're producing. Do you want me to pause to take questions, or shall I go on?
Are there any urgent questions on that? Caroline?
Yeah,
quickly,
So I'm sorry about this, but I've got too many red lines being marked all over this. So although, you know, these are, I'm not quite sure what you used a description for them, directions of travel, I think you've described them. And for me, I've got too many questions over what do you mean by, and no, I don't think so. And I would need to take this away and discuss it with my own highways transport officers before I might be comfortable signing up to even some of these as directions of travel. So So that just might be that, you know, I haven't had time to read this, digest it, have conversations with people locally about it, but I'm not comfortable currently. I couldn't sign up to this being put out there in the public domain personally. Sorry.
So what do you suggest, James, for a politician who needs to talk to their office? What's that? Does it feed into timeline and how Caroline can kind of get the support and whatever to feel comfortable or not comfortable with what's happening?
I think it very much feeds into the timeline, and as I say, none of it is set in stone. It's there to prompt discussion and ideas and suggestions. So, Councillor Thomas, I mean, if you want to have an offline discussion about it with the Western Gateway, happy to do that and bring your officers along as well. But I think this is an open invitation to all board members to review the direction statement and to feedback thoughts and ideas. And if you're not happy with certain areas, please flag those up as well. You know, it's very much a work in development, and yeah, all ideas and contributions are welcome. So I think it does fit in with our timeline.
I'm not convinced the timelines would work. I mean, you're talking about a draft transport plan, which I appreciate is draft for public consultation, but nonetheless, I think all the authorities would have to be comfortable with what is being proposed to go out to consultation, and you want all local authorities to do that within 2 months, when we're just at the moment, in the absence of any DFT guidelines on local transport plans, deciding to kind of crack on with our local transport plan, but we've only just recently decided to do that. There's, you know, I would feel that timeline about being ready for a draft one for public consultation the 6th of December is very unlikely.
To be fair, Caroline, we slightly delayed it. It has been in the offing for quite a while. So, okay. James, the offer from James is there for any of us with our officers to meet with him and feel comfortable or uncomfortable with this. I guess the thing to highlight is we will, as politicians, when it comes to communicating this, we will need to play a big part in that, because there isn't a big budget for holding meetings, etc., etc. So it will be good if we can really get that out to stakeholders, get that in our diaries, just to spend a little time on that when it comes. Can I ask now that we move on to financial update for the decision plan, please, James?
Yes, there are two papers related to this item, papers D and E. One is the programme financial update, and the other one is the forward decision plan. These are standard reports that we bring to the board every time. I'll just pull out just a couple of key things from both reports, bearing in mind the time. Paper D, which is the programme and financial update, there's the key financial tables in there, which now reflect the reduced budget that we're working to in 23-24. So what I was talking about earlier in terms of the £211,000 reduced budget. We've got a total budget of £785,000. We've got a committed spend of £234,000. It will appear that we've only spent £54,000 so far of that budget, but just to flag up that that only takes us to August, so we're missing September. And what's not included is all the areas of work where we're just starting to firm up and are almost ready to commit to spend as well. So there's actually around about another £210,000 which is about to be committed. So whilst it might look as though we haven't spent very much so far, we are on the verge of spending a lot more over the next coming months, and that should be very evident when we get to the December board. So hopefully that's just to provide some reassurance that we will be aiming to spend that full £785,000 budget by the end of the financial year. And then just in terms of the for decision plan, the key thing to look at is the decisions that we had hoped to bring to this board, particularly around the cycling strategy, an example, and the future areas of freight work. We will bring those back to the board in December for decision, and one of the decisions in December is that strategic transport plan consultation draft, which, just given the comments just raised by Councillor Thomas, we will have another look at that one as well. So apologies, Chair, that was a bit of a rush through, but I just thought I ought to raise those 2 points about the decisions and the spend on the budget.
Thank you. No, I mean, it does highlight the fact that we're going to have a very heavy agenda in December and some very important things on there. So don't know, the pre-meeting may need to take some radical decisions. I think James and Alan as to what's included in that meeting, and not just follow the normal format, because I'm not sure we're going to have to be quite focused about what that meeting does. And as we'll be in person, I think it's a good chance to deal with some things and perhaps not to deal with some others. Thank you. We have one item of AOB notified. That's Caroline, isn't it?
Chair, Councillor Gray had his hand up, I think.
Yeah, just to say, Don, I think it's unrealistic that we only have 2 hours in December, because I do think there are several things where, and this is sort of illustrated again today, we don't have enough time to get through and look at things in an appropriate amount of detail. And even with pre-meeting considerations and all the rest of it, I think it might be wise that we look at extending that meeting.
I welcome that coming from you. I wanted to say it, but I'm glad somebody else has said it. I don't want to keep people in Trowbridge any longer than, but I do think there's some really important things on the agenda for the next meeting, which do get right to the heart of the point of this board, actually. And I think to be there face to face and actually have another half an hour for that meeting would be valuable. So I won't take a vote on it. Can we please go for it and ask that people make that real effort? And from what I remember, the lunch was excellent last time. So I thank Alan in advance for that again. It is, Caroline, your AOB, please.
Yep, so I'll be as brief as I can. So as we know, we've had an update on the M4 South Coast study recently, the STB officers have, and essentially we're expecting a completed report with recommendations to be with the DFT on next steps in the late autumn, and that's all good. And the draft RAS 3 is published also at the end of 23, where we are anticipating an in principle reference to the North-South study. So National Highways have encouraged us to remind DFT of our support, that's us as a strategic transport body, support for the findings of the study, to remind them that that our support is very strong, and that one way that we can help do this particularly well would be by re-establishing the Corridor Alliance that secured the mandate for the study to happen in the first place. So Baines, Wiltshire, BCP and Dorset councils working together to get across a common message. So we were just looking for the board's blessing that alliance is reignited, if you like, in order to take forward and promote our support for this for the North-South study work with DFT. So we're just looking for a note to say that that's fine.
Thank you, Carol. And obviously that working group isn't a subgroup of the STB at all, but unless anyone has any objections, I think it's quite right that we do offer our approval and blessing for the work that they are going to take up once more on this very important transport corridor. Does anyone have any objection to us sending a note to that effect, or actually recording that in any correspondence with DFT? Is that okay with people? I hear no shouts, so thank you, Caroline, for bringing that to our attention. No other items of AOB have been advised, Alan, so we conclude the meeting. I look forward very much to seeing everyone in Trowbridge in December. Please try and make it if you can, because it will be an important meeting. Also, I want to say thanks to those who have worked on comms for the STB, because I continue to think we do excellent comms, both on social media and website. And so one of the things we can do as politicians is to inform other people and ping those around, because I think we do that particularly well. And so I think we should do that. And I look forward to seeing everybody in December. Thank you to all the officers and for everyone who has attended. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
That's great. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.